Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's morning coffee. It's Cherry Hill,
sir.
New Jersey, and it's morning coffee with
Yes, sir.
Bob Goldstein. I'm Joe
Goldstein.
Osmendi.
Good morning, Joe.
Morning. Good to see you, Bob.
Good to see you.
And
Good to be
this
seen.
is our expert series show. Okay?
Love it, yeah.
And we're our expert here, of course, is the Workcred series.
Yeah.
And we also we're joined by Roy Swift, who's CEO of Workcred, and also Graham Brent, who's CEO of the National Commission of Crane Operators. Gentlemen, welcome to Morning Coffee.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good. Well, Graham, let's get right into crane operations. As you know, I talked to you before. I used to work with Amquip, which was a crane operation company, and when I worked with Sunoco back here in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia area. So tell us a little bit about your organization and what you do.
Yeah, well, thanks. And thanks, first of all, for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Well, it's been an interesting journey. I'm actually, Joe, I'm actually now working with the NCCCO Foundation. And this is an organization that was set up by NCCCO, which, as you rightly say, stands for the National Commission for the Certification of Crane Operators. That was its original title, its original name, because that's what we did back in '96 through to 2000, probably the mid 2000s. Just focused on crane operators, but since then, the program that NCCCO runs has expanded to include, I think it's now more than a dozen programs related to, not necessarily just crane operators, but related to crane operators. So, we've always said that it's not just important for the crane operator himself or herself to be qualified. In our case, it would be certified, but also to make sure the rest of the crew are. So, the crane operator, as important as that role is, and it is mightily important in any lifting operation that involves lifting equipment, that person is working with a team. And the whole team needs to be on board, right? So you have other folks involved. You have riggers who rig the load. You have signal persons that oftentimes hold lives in their hand because they have to give signals to the crane operator when the crane operator can't see the load. You have inspectors who inspect the crane to make sure that it's in good working order. And you have other folks around the site. You have the lift planners who obviously get involved at the very early stages of many lifts to make sure that the lift is planned correctly. So you have a whole team of people, and over the years, the success of the program that NCCCO started back in '96 has expanded to include other folks that are also working with that crane operator on site.
Right. Graham, are crane operators in demand?
Joe, I just wanted to say that at the beginning that the reason Workcred thought it was so important for Graham Brent to be part is he's one of these pioneers that has led the way for the not only crane operators, but as he's talking about the construction. I've been by his side looking at OSHA rules. I've been by his side looking at state licensure issues. And he's a man that I think is trying to bring new light into careers. The workforce issues of today is short-term credentials that get you good jobs. Well, what we're talking about today is exactly it. And his foundation responsibilities as the CEO and executive director is to really bring that word out to all types of populations. And I know he's going to talk a lot about some of his work today and trying to bring that message to, and hopefully your listeners today will see this in a new light and really encourage people that, when people are struggling in this workforce community right now, this is an area that really can provide a lot of opportunity for people.
Wow.
Well, and if you don't mind, if I just build on that, because Roy he nailed it. First of all, let me say that as always, this is an industry developed program, and I had the privilege of being in pretty close to the beginning of it, and it's been a remarkable process. This is an example of how literally a dozen people in a room can change an industry, and because that's how this started. And everybody didn't give it a second chance. Many people didn't. We ran into the sort of issues that I know we were talking about before we started this morning about I've done it this way for so many years, why should I change? And that was often wrapped in colorful language about why we were doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. And eventually it's become, as Roy mentioned, the de facto way of doing things, and to the point where it's been adopted by federal agencies, federal OSHA in particular, but not exclusively. Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Navy, and other government entities have embraced the programs over the years. But here's the thing. So the foundation was set up 3 years ago, and I moved, if you will, sideways to run things there. And the whole point around the foundation was in many ways a reflection of the success of the program. So as the programs had evolved over 20 some years, NCCCO had become involved in other aspects that were related to certification, but weren't mainstream certification. So things like education of employers, regulatory mapping, and so forth. And so it was felt that this was a great opportunity to create an entity that would allow NCCCO to continue with the certification work, but then give real life to some of these other activities. Roy's already mentioned one, which is absolutely critical and central to what we're talking about today and central to the foundation, and that's involvement with youth. Here's the tragedy of it all, and this has been true anyway, but it's particularly pertinent now because we have this X trillion dollar infrastructure program coming through. We are going to be dramatically short of people in construction to do the work that's being suggested that we can get done. And that's going to involve crane operators, because when you start building, you're going to need a crane at some point, even if it's a road. You know, what happens when you build a road, you don't necessarily need a crane, but you're going to put a bridge over a road. Well, then you're going to bring a crane in. So pretty much, if you can think of it, you're going to be bringing crane operators in. And our education system has failed, frankly, our employment process here in the United States for at least a decade, probably more. When I first got into things related to cranes in my first career as a journalist in the late 70s, we were talking about a labor shortage then. And in the 30, 40 years since then, that's come up and down. Now it's really up. And we're going to hit a problem here if we don't manage to get, in part, it's not all, the blame isn't all to be laid at the U.S. education system, but if we don't get the education system and the folks in it attuned to the idea that here is, and Roy mentioned this, a short pathway to a key job. This is a fabulous, it's actually not even a job, and it's not a wage, it's a salary to a career. A career as a crane operator and related trades. And, this isn't a college bashing exercise because college has its place, but when you have 50% of college students drop out before they graduate, there's something clearly we need to take a look at. And the tragedy is that those 50% or a portion of them could be gainfully employed, could have been gainfully employed for the 2 to 4 years they were struggling to get their degree in something that they may not even have had a clear pathway post-degree. They could have been earning good money during that time. We're part of a program that we're very excited about called Lift and Move USA. Lift and Move USA. And at its heart, it's absolutely as simple as you can get. All it does really is it provides an opportunity for high schoolers and their teachers and their high school counselors, just as importantly, to get out into the world of cranes. So that could be an open day, if you will, open house at a crane rental place around the country, and we've done many of these, and just expose the kids to the opportunities that the trades, which the education system has pretty much turned its back on over the years, that the trades can offer. And I'm very passionate about this, as you can imagine, but I'll close this portion by saying we have one high school teacher that I was privy to hearing at one of the information sections of an open house that we were a part of. And he said, hey guys, after he heard the presentation from one of the seasoned crane operators there, he said, hey, let's put it this way. He said, you can go to college and that's absolutely fine if you want to do that. But he said, if you go to college and you come out of college after 4 years with maybe $60,000, $100,000 in debt that you've either managed to pay off or will still need to pay off. During that time, you could have earned $100,000.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's the other for some reason secret that people don't seem to know is that you can be in six figures running cranes within a relatively short period of time. Certification doesn't get you there immediately, obviously, because you need to have experience and work your way through the industry. But if you look around in Philadelphia, New Jersey, where I know you are, any big city, you're going to be talking about some pretty serious money being made by those crane operators sitting, 100 feet, 200 feet, even higher in the air, operating that equipment.
Interesting. Yeah, it's financially rewarding, it sounds like, and there's great opportunity.
One of the things I think is so important, Graham, is the fact that, and Roy and I have discussed it so many times, is getting a college education and having to flip burgers because there's no need for what your education into. And educators seem to not understand that certification can lead you to great jobs and a lot less time too, as you mentioned. But also, I think that what you said is people, high school dropouts, let's say, or people that are coming out of the military. Those are perfect examples how their training can be used for the crane operation and get that transition from the military back into the private sector very easily.
Well,
yeah.
Again, you've hit another nail on the head there with military transition, because that's another area that many employers actually have come to realize is a really effective channel for them. I mean, there's some self-interest here, obviously, but you talk to an employer who routinely employs veterans, and he'll tell you, or she'll tell you that they have the right work ethic, whether or not they even have crane operator experience. But I mean, they already hit the ground running with the right work ethic. They get to the work on time. They're consistent. They understand the process. They know what it's like to learn and take their job seriously. But if you've actually been doing this job in some form in the military, well, then you're at second base immediately, if not further. We had some misfires in the early days, and Roy will remember that, at least as far as crane operators go, trying to focus in our military transition work on mapping the content, knowledge, and skills that the crane operators in the military have with their counterparts in civilian life, and it really got all kind of tangled up, trying to make a correspondence between the two. But I mean, the bottom line reality is that if you've been, like I say, if you've been doing this work in the military or anywhere else, you already have part of that experience that we just talked about. Certification plus experience helps you get to the point where you need to be, which is the ultimate goal is qualification, being qualified to do the job. So that's another part of the work we're trying to do at the foundation, is to become more engaged, not in some ways directly with the military, but also with those who are doing work with the military. So there are programs like SkillBridge, which allow serving military in the final 6 months of their service to engage in training, which will prepare them for a very lucrative and rewarding civilian career. So we're working not directly with SkillBridge, but with companies that work with SkillBridge. So that's the sort of engagement that we feel where we can try and make a difference.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Also, you have scholarships and grants available too, correct, Graham?
Well, we do this in a fairly, at this stage, a fairly modest way. Yes, certainly as part of the mission of the organization is to be able to provide more of those in the future, and we are able to do that in a limited way at the moment. Part of that program, I would just tell you, like so many things that COVID did, got upended during the pandemic because it seriously hit some of our revenue flow coming into the foundation. So we had to put some of that work on hold, but that's certainly the desire, is for those folks for whom even $1,000 can make a big difference. In helping them get their first step towards a credential. That I will say that one of the things that I'm very pleased that we got involved with. We certainly weren't the only instigator of this, but way back in about 2000, we were part of a process that expanded the GI Bill, so it would actually cover the cost not just of training for retiring GIs, but also the cost of certification. That was a big step, I think, in helping folks who who might not otherwise have the financial resources to pay for certification.
Yeah, and Joe, certification is a signal by a third party that people have the knowledge, skills, and abilities, and that's why certification is so important. The employer can be much more assured, nothing's 100%, but more assured that someone is coming with the necessary skills because of the rigor of the certification of NCCCO in this regard. And the other point I want to make about the business of people looking at construction as dead-end jobs, that it can be a career, even within the crane operator. I mean, Graham, when he was with the certification body, created this. I mean, the people who do the rigging, the people who do the loading, then you can become the operator. I mean, that in itself is a career progression sort of thing. So this whole idea that, oh, well, construction, you just get a job and you never go anywhere with it is really a myth.
Well, you're exactly right, and obviously cranes and everything else have gotten far more sophisticated, so you have to have the knowledge to be able to operate those things now. I mean, it's not just like going up there and pressing a few buttons.
Right, it's like computers.
Right,
all
exactly.
the circuitry.
Roy, why don't you go into a little
That's
bit
exactly right.
Deep education.
And you know, it's kind of interesting that people have done studies on this. It's obviously it's everyone is different, and the demographics, you know, you've got to be careful with. But that very evolution that you've talked about in the control systems of cranes has provided greater access in many ways for youth, because, you know, they're growing up with this technology, right? They're surrounded by it all day long, whether they're gamers or not. You know, that doesn't, I mean, some of those that are jump on some of these simulators, and the next thing you know, they're in the seat of a crane. Now, they don't have the experience, so I keep emphasizing that. This isn't a gateway to the six-figure jobs that we've been talking about, but it's certainly a huge door opener. And by the same fashion, some of the older folks in the industry that are retiring, you know, have had challenges with some of that technology. So, in other words, we're preparing the way, if you will, for the new next generation of crane operators. And that's the other thing that is so good about the Lift and Move initiative, is that it physically, literally puts high schoolers into the cabs of the cranes. And, you know, their eyes just widen because they can't believe that this is a crane. You know, this looks like a really cool piece of equipment here, and I get to play all these, you know, I see all these screens that are giving me all this information. And, you know, instead of the levers that they think they got to have 3 arms and 4 legs to operate it, those days are long
Like an
gone.
octopus.
And they're sitting there in air-conditioned comfort, or heated comfort if it's the winter. They've got joystick controls by their arms. I mean, the most they probably ever reach out for is their glass of water or a cup of tea, right? So they have the job that most other folks on the construction site are very envious of. So it's just a great process. And like I say, the tragedy is that it's not well understood. It's not anyone's particular fault, but this is the purpose of some of these initiatives, is simply to bring people together for a greater understanding of the potential.
Hey, Graham, I wanted to ask, did any of the cranes with the new technology have voice command?
Well, not that I'm aware of, but I would be very surprised if manufacturers weren't experimenting with that. I will say that one of the things we looked at in the new cutting edge technology, one of the studies that the foundation has already conducted, is to see whether or not virtual reality technology could play a role in certification. And that was a very exciting process. We did a couple of studies, and those studies are available on our website. And I guess the conclusion was perhaps, right? It's always a challenge when you're dealing with new technology, but the opportunity for virtual reality to be able to create scenarios that you wouldn't even want to try and replicate in real life during an examination, I think is huge. And I can see that happening, in the years to come.
Yeah, that's exciting.
I'll tell you, Roy, you bring the most fascinating guests on your expert show with on Morning Coffee. We love to have you all the time.
Yeah.
And Graham, you've given me opened my eyes a lot to the crane industry and the opportunities for people to really get great jobs in a very short period of time. Again, what certification is all about, and that's one thing that I think my viewers are really excited about. Graham, can you please, at this point, tell us where our viewers can get more information and who should call you and how they can reach you?
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Well, as always, the website's the best place to go. So that's ncccofoundation.org. And just be sure you've got 3 C's in there, ncccofoundation.org. And my contact information's on there. So that's the best place. And a lot of that information we talked about is actually posted there. So that would be the first place I would go.
Excellent.
Gentlemen, thank you
Joe,
so
I
much.
want to mention before we finish up today that this is an example of an industry and occupations that can help close the equity gap. One of the other big questions in the workforce community these days is, what are the occupations that can close the equity gap? And this is certainly one of them. Everybody has an equal opportunity to do it. Many people, given the focus and the motivation to do it, can do it. So this is one that when people talk about equity, we should be paying more attention to this. Sports is not the only way to bring equity.
Yeah, for sure.
Boy, that couldn't have been said any better than that, Roy. And gentlemen, thanks again for joining us on Morning Coffee. We really appreciate your expertise, and that's what the Experts thing is all about, especially Workcred series. It's a great series.
This was a great segment.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay,
For sure.
Thanks, Joe.
thank you, and we'll see you on the next Expert series.